The word is finally out. CBS Sports and the Big Ten Conference have reached a brand new, long-term, multi-platform rights agreement for football and basketball through the 2029-2030 season. Every CBS Big Ten football and basketball game in package will air on CBS and stream live on Paramount+. Be sure to subscribe. With marquee Big Ten football games to be showcased weekly on college football's highest-rated network at 3:30 p.m. Eastern, beginning with the 2024 season. Select games will air during the 2023 season, though. CBS Sports will also present the Big Ten Football Championship game in 2024 and 2028. It's the big news of the day. So where are we going to talk about it? Right here on the block. It's time to bring in my guys. I am Colin Kennedy. These are the stars of the show. Carl Reed, Blake Brockermeyer here, ready to talk some college ball. And gentlemen, we're company men. CBS has just acquired the rights of the Big Ten Conference. This is, for lack of a better term, a very big deal. Carl, going to you first. Your reaction as the news reveals the Big Ten Conference is headed to CBS Sports.
Huge day here for us at CBS. You're talking about the number one network when it comes down to airing college football games. Can you imagine that 3:30 time slot? Ohio State versus USC. It doesn't get any better than that in the college football landscape. Big time move by CBS and the Big Ten as the Big Ten looks to continue to compete with the SEC for the best conference in college football.
Yeah, I get chills listening to that music. You know, college football is coming. Just thinking about some of the games that are going to be on at 3:30 with Michigan State, Wisconsin games, singing Jump Around. Like Carl said, USC and Ohio State, the whiteout games at Penn State. So it's going to be an amazing thing to be a part of here at CBS, and I'm excited for it, and I can't wait for the Big Ten and the USC and UCLA to merge with them, and it's going to be an exciting day in college football when that happens.
And of course, CBS has been the home for one of college football's most iconic rivalries, the Iron Bowl. Now, we here at CBS will get to see the game. Michigan, Ohio State, year in and year out. I can't wait to watch it. This conference and its featured ability right here on CBS is going to be an outstanding product. And I know our team at CBS is going to do an outstanding job of carrying these games. But speaking of games, we got some coming up very soon. Obviously, we got to get to the 2022 season before all those other ones coming up. And where do I want to start with, obviously, our favorite segment of the day these days, fall camp intel and developments. Where do I want to start when we start with fall camp intel? I want to go out to Austin, Texas. All right, a little bit of news here. It sounds like Steve Sarkisian, head coach at Texas, quote, has an idea of who the next Texas starting quarterback is going to be per ESPN. Now, our own Chip Brown and Taylor Estes on the Flagship podcast have said they believe it will be Hudson Card, not Quinn Ewers. So, what do I want to know? If it is Hudson Card, not Quinn Ewers, what does this mean, Blake, besides the fact that Carl Reed's going to have to wear a wig right here on this show?
Yeah, that's the most important thing to me is seeing Carl Reed wear a wig. But I think what it says is Hudson Card is the best option right now to give Texas a chance to win at quarterback. I think, he's got a little bit of experience last year, starting the first couple of games of the season, played a little bit more throughout the season, but I think he's shown that he's capable and ready right now, and that Quinn Ewers might need a little bit more time to develop. And hats off to Hudson Card if that's true, because he had all the odds stacked against him. Texas went all out to bring Quinn Ewers in to beat him out, and I really applaud Hudson for fighting and staying and earning and winning this job if these reports are true.
What it means to me is you have to beware of crowning people before they prove anything. We got $1 million NIL deal for Quinn Ewers to go to Ohio State. He got a ton of money to come back to the University of Texas. But looking back on this thing, did he really miss out by not having that last year of development in high school when he was a part of a very good program? And did he expedite his process and move on too fast? College football is a game about winning. And from what it sounds like, Hudson Card has outplayed him to this point. Keep in mind that Hudson Card, when Urias came in, could have entered the transfer portal himself, but elected to stay and fight for the job. So sometimes competing and showing that you're the better guy works out. But I will tell you what now, if I have to wear this wig because Quinn loses this battle, man, it's going to be dark days on the block.
Yeah, Texas has to win now. There's a lot of pressure under Coach Sark to win now. And, he knows that he has to do whatever it takes to give him the best chance. And like I said, if these reports are true, then Hudson Card is deserving of this. And I hope he takes full advantage of this opportunity and can win this job and be a great quarterback at Texas this season.
I mean, look, Carl, speak for yourself. It may be a dark day for you here on the block, but the moment you put that wig on, everyone in this building is going to be ecstatic, including, the internet. So I'm looking forward to that day if it comes. Now, I will say this, again, to reiterate, this is an idea. This isn't for certain. Quinn Ewers still has an opportunity to compete. But I also want to circle back to this because this is kind of a theme, and this show specifically has continued to preach the cautionary tale of the transfer portal. And Carl, I want to go to you on this. We've seen now Luke Altmaier battle for his spot despite a transfer coming in. We've seen Garrett Nussmeier battle for his spot despite a transfer coming in. And now here comes Hudson Card. A lot of these quarterbacks are standing their ground, Carl. And now we're seeing Card potentially hold off one of the biggest names in the portal this cycle.
Football is still a competitive sport. It's the most competitive game that we have. There's no magic wand to it. You have to learn a system. You have to prove that you can be a leader of men and that you can inspire the men that you're playing with to want to go out and do battle with you. This is not about camp arms and T-shirts and shorts when you're looking at those 11 guys on the field on offense with you and the other 11 on defense. You have to be able to compete and you have to be a dog. And sometimes in the environment that recruiting creates, it takes away some of the competitive greatness from guys. And we're seeing across the country, there are some guys who dug their heels in, have fought for their positions, and have competed and have just won the job the old-fashioned way by being better than the other guy. This is football. This isn't tennis. This isn't basketball where you can just add one guy and it's add water. In the game of football, and to beat a quarterback on a championship level team at the Division I level, you have to be a special guy, you have to be a special leader, and you have to have a special type of toughness. And some of these kids should be applauded for sticking in there and competing and not giving in to the hype.
There's one thing that you can't fake is who's the best quarterback on the roster. So if you try to anoint somebody that's the best quarterback on your roster, that's not. I'm not saying either one of them is or isn't, but I'm saying that everyone on the team knows who gives them the best chance to win. And if any team just picks a guy just because that's who they want to be the starter, then that can divide the team as quick as anybody. So I think the most important thing here is that they have a big scrimmage on Saturday. They're both going to compete. And this job is going to be a competition throughout the whole season. So may the best man win, and Coach Sark realizes that he needs to win, and he's going to do whatever it takes to put the best product on the field that he can, and I know that he will.
Blake, you touched on exactly what I was going to go to, so I'm glad you did. Obviously, this is still a battle. Again, nothing is assumed. They have to decide this ahead of the season. And until we get word – and until we start playing some football games, like you mentioned, this thing could go well into the year. I feel like still we're going to see both guys start a game for Texas this upcoming season. All right, let's now go from Austin to the state of Alabama because in Tuscaloosa, they're dealing with a little bit of a cornerback injury problem. Alabama cornerback Eli Ricks, speaking of transfers, he's come in from LSU, and now he's dealing with a little bit of a back problem, according to Bama Online's Charlie Potter. You've also got a guy in Kyrie Jackson, who obviously has been there, got a little banged up. He shouldn't miss a lot of time. But, hey, Eli Ricks, Kyrie Jackson, and Kool-Aid McKinstry have all been competing for a job in that cornerback room. And, hey, I mean, Terrion Arnold, according to our guys at Bama Online, he's been competing as well. So, Carl, I want to know, as we look at how they're reacting to some of the shuffling at quarterback, how big of a deal is this for a guy like Eli Ricks that he might miss some time when he's already battling for a starting role at Alabama?
Well, for him, it's probably a big deal because while you're sitting out, other guys are going to go in there and make plays. And if they solidify themselves as starters and entrench themselves by playing very well while you're out, they can hold on to those positions. But I also think with the way the teams are playing offensively, Alabama needs Eli Ricks to be able to play as soon as possible. They had depth issues in the secondary last year towards the end of the season. He really brings in great depth. He's also a great talent that's competing for a starting spot. You would hope that he gets back soon for the Crimson Tide. But those other guys that he's been competing with, this is an opportunity for them to dig in and lock their spots up as they head into the 2022 season.
I think the beauty of this for Alabama is look at the front four, front five that they're going to be rushing the quarterback with, and you can get away with a little bit less than stellar cornerback play at Alabama because the ball better be out in about 2.5 seconds or the quarterback's going to be on the ground. So that will help their development. But like Carl said, these guys, everyone needs depth at this position. Everyone's playing 3 or 4 wideouts or big tight end sets like Georgia's going to do this year. So you got to have a plan, and you need healthy bodies to win in the SEC. And at the end of the season, it's a battle of attrition.
I'm very excited to see how that group pans out. I think it's one of the most under-discussed storylines in college football today. We see Alabama right now as the perceived favorite to win the national championship, but we know exactly what happened with that cornerback group last year. It somewhat hindered them en route to appearing but not winning the national title. If they can figure it out with Eli Ricks and crew, they should be well on their way to potentially winning the title in 2022. Now, speaking of Alabama, speaking of movement and transfers, guy we talked about yesterday in the headlines again, Iabiano, former 5-star recruit and a top 5 player at 24/7 Sports at the time he was a high school prospect, is now transferring to the University of Michigan. That's right, the Wolverines picking him up. He is officially enrolled. Obviously, this is all continuing to pan out before our own eyes, but as early as this morning, he was in the student database. So, Blake, how big of a deal is this that they're picking up Iabiano? And I mean, for me personally, it feels like this will put massive expectations on his shoulders as he tries to step into a wide open room at pass rusher there.
Yeah, my expectations are a little bit different than yours, Colin. My expectations are if he does anything, it's a plus at Michigan because he's proven so far in his career that he hasn't been productive at 3 different spots. He hasn't played at the highest level of college football and produced. And so I have a lot of question marks on what he can do at Michigan. I hope he has a great season and can do and be a big help for them because they need him on the edge at Michigan. But my expectations are very low for him, and whatever he does there on the field is a bonus the way I look at it.
You know, if these guys keep transferring from one school to another, at some point they just got to produce. And he's going to a Michigan team that runs a 4-down front. He can probably play 2 different positions in that group. He can probably play one of the outside 5 techs or inside at the 3 tech. And so it's up to him whether or not he produces and plays hard and has some consistency. But we're getting a lot of these transfers that aren't having success at one place and they're going somewhere else and they're still not having the success. So at some point, we got to be accountable for our performance. I am going to be interested to see what he does in the change going to Michigan because they do have a clearer path for him to play sooner on the defensive line, and they have a defense that might fit his talent a little bit better, but it is going to be interesting to see, can he finally live up to the hype?
So, Carl, I want to ask you real quick.
Remember what I said yesterday. When you leave Alabama on bad terms, the expectations level should be way lower because there's something's up. And so that's why I say that. I have low expectations for him. I hope it works out great. I hope he breaks Aiden Hutchinson's sack record this season, but I don't think that will happen.
Going off of that real quick, too, and Carl, I'd be interested to see. I mean, you see him. He's number 3 at one point in the player rankings, and he's stepping into a room where David Ojabo, Aiden Hutchinson, they also lost a guy in Chris Hinton. The defensive line is going to meet some expectations. I don't know that they can. Now, last season, Iabiano reportedly around 6 sacks, 9.5 tackles for loss. So he's disrupted, but at a much lower level. Carl, What's your expectation for this guy as he likely, in the perception of a Michigan fan, has to fill the shoes of guys like Ajabo and Hutchinson?
Well, I don't expect them to be as productive as those guys because they were very, very special players. I think you got to be really careful when you compare a guy to the number 2 pick in the NFL draft, especially when he hasn't consistently produced at that level. But with so many guys, one of the biggest thing that is unknown when we rank guys or you have recruiting rankings or expectations is what's in a guy's head, in his mind, and in his heart, because that is the difference maker. Does he want it is best. There's a lot of guys in college football that are really, really special talents, but they don't love to play the game and they don't want it as bad as everybody else. He has to prove that he wants to be a great football player when he goes to Michigan, and everybody doesn't want that. A lot of super talented guys never live up to the hype because they're not in love with the process that it takes to be a great player.
And there's a lot in the NFL, you just play football. In college, you got to go to class, you got to be academically eligible, you got to be able to, thrive on a college campus. So there's so much more that goes into it than just playing football in college. So it's not just going out there, putting a helmet on and producing on Saturdays. You have to do more than that to fit in and make sure that that the culture at whatever school you go to can thrive and be even better when you get there.
It's an excellent point by both of you. If there's one thing we learned in the magical storylines, if you will, of Aiden Hutchinson and David Ojabo last season, is that both of them have unreal work ethics. Now Iabiano must adopt a similar approach as he tries to fit in at Michigan. Now, let's talk about the brand new 24/7 Sports preseason true freshman All-American team. It's just been released at 247sports.com. Go check it out while you're watching the show. But while you're reading along, I want to go to you, Carl, because you talked about this with Chris Hummer yesterday right here on the channel. And now I want to highlight whoever you didn't get a chance to. Who's a freshman in your mind that definitely deserves some recognition who's on this list?
Penn State brought an outstanding running back in. That's a true freshman that I really think is going to come in here and make a major impact. Penn State has been great at recruiting. James Franklin has an opportunity here to take his program to another level. The expectations have to be high coming in for Singletary at the running back position. They're going to need an immediate contribution from him. And this is a special group of freshmen that we have here on our All-American team.
He's an exciting player. I mean, I think Nick Singleton specifically is a guy who could be one of the most impactful true freshmen because Penn State with a run game changes everything last year and certainly this year. Go ahead, Cole.
And Colin, they're going to need him to play because that offensive line isn't as strong as what it has been in the passing game. So when you bring a guy like Nick in and he can give you a good downhill running game, that really relieves the offensive line in terms of how much they have to do in the pass protection game. I think that he's got a chance to be a really special player for them, and they're going to need great, great things out of him this freshman season. This is a dynamic running back.
Blake, you've been big on Penn State's offensive line development. And on top of this, I mean, Sean Clifford's coming off an injury. Real quick, your thoughts on Nick Singleton?
Yeah, I think, he can really help their offensive line. You can look at offensive line running backs. They're kind of a marriage. So a really good offensive line can make kind of an average back look pretty good, and vice versa. An elite running back can make an average O-line look pretty good. So I've been on both sides of it. And I think he can really help out Penn State's offensive line. I have a lot of questions about how good they can be this year. And that's going to be kind of, in my opinion, how far Penn State can go this season is going to be on how good their offensive line is. And Nick Singleton's going to have to really help them and make them look maybe a little bit better than they really are.
All right, now, Blake, I want to go back to you. Obviously, we talked about Nick Singleton, who Carl wanted to highlight. Give me a freshman that you want to highlight ahead of the 2022 season.
Well, Kelvin Banks at Texas is the guy that I think everyone's got their eye on. And not only him, but they've got 3 freshmen that I think can potentially start at Texas this year, in Cole Hudson and DJ Campbell, an offensive guard who I kind of project as a center down the road. But those three guys can make a big impact at Texas this year. It's very hard to play offensive line as a true freshman, especially when you're not an early enrollee. So Kelvin Banks looks likely to start early, if not the first game at Texas. Texas A&M had two true freshmen start last year in Bryce Foster and Reuben Fothery, and Notre Dame had two freshmen start in Blake Fisher and Joe Alt. So it can be done. They're going to take some lumps along the way. You can't expect them to be all-American offensive linemen right off the bat, but it will pay dividends for Texas to play these guys early, and down the road next year, they can turn out to be really great players the longer they're playing together.
Carl, real quick, your thoughts on these Texas offensive linemen. Man, it's tough to play in the trenches this early.
It's tough to play this early in the trenches, but I mean, they've been getting rave reviews out of Austin. And I know Blake has been telling me about these guys all summer long. And so these guys maybe they're the exception to the rule, that they're going to be able to come in and really, really do great things for Texas. I know for them to meet the expectations that they have down in Austin, those young offensive linemen are going to have to play well, quick, fast, in a hurry. But I do think that in the Big 12 conference, they do have a schedule that is favorable to them being developed along the way. They're not in the SEC yet. So they do have some opponents that they should be able to gain some confidence against. But, man, you're looking at really special times up front for Texas. And down the road, we should be seeing these three guys picked up very high in the NFL draft.
Yeah, and Coach Sark and Kyle Flood will do a good job of helping these guys and maximizing their talents. They're not going to just put them on an island and say, hey, go block, Will Smith and Dallas Turner and Chris Braswell one-on-one the whole game. Like, they're going to have a plan. They're going to chip, slide, help, do as much as they can to keep the offense as balanced as they can. Having Bijan Robinson is huge because he can really help these guys, just being an elite talent that he is. So Texas will do a good job of making these guys comfortable and giving them as much help as they can. And that will pay dividends, because the worst thing you can do is throw a freshman out there and have them just get abused early. And mentally, that can take a toll on you.
I will say, we do not talk enough about how talented that Texas running back room is. And as you mentioned, Blake, that relationship can help one another out. They got a lot of dudes in that backfield at Texas, and obviously trying to get Hudson Card settled in there as well. Those running backs could decide a lot as they try to develop those very talented young offensive linemen. All right, final thing here on the show today. Major news emerging. Keon Keeley, 5-star edge rusher in the class of 2023, has decommitted from Notre Dame. He is the number 9 player in the 2023 top 247 and the number 1 ranked edge rusher in the class. He was committed to Notre Dame since 2021, but now opening things up, crystal balls coming in for the Alabama Crimson Tide. So, Carl, how do you pivot from here if you're Notre Dame? And how big is it now for Marcus Freeman to finally get to the season and start winning some games so he can hold on to these guys?
Man, recruiting is a tough business, and it's really hard to get guys. It's even harder to hold on to them. I think as we go through the commitment season and we're seeing all of these guys that are committing to these schools, we have to also be prepared for the decommitment season that's coming up. Well, one of my questions is to high school coaches and ADs across the country, after you have these big commitment ceremonies, how do you handle the decommitment and the recommitment? Do you have another big ceremony going on? I think this does sting a little bit for Marcus Freeman and his Notre Dame team, but they have to keep recruiting and keep going after great guys. And everybody is saying the rumors that this kid is going to end up at Alabama. If he ends up at the University of Alabama, once again, we know how strong of a closer Nick Saban has been over the years, and especially getting guys to flip in the end. So it's no surprise to me that this happens, but it is something that Notre Dame has to continue to go back to work and chop wood.
Yeah, I mean, Notre Dame's, this is just part of being a big-time college football program. You're going to be filled with disappointments. You're going to recruit nationally like Notre Dame does. They're a special place, a special school. It's not for everyone. but they're going to go get great players too. They've had a lot of good defensive linemen come through there as well. You're going to, I mean, you can't, there's no regrets with coaches. When you lose a guy, you move on to the next guy. I mean, I'm sure they'll keep recruiting him to the whistle, but there's a lot of talented players. There's a lot of guys that can fit his scheme, Marcus Freeman's scheme at Notre Dame. And I think you just have to move on to the next guy and you know, take an L here and there, but that's just part of life of being a big time college football coach.
Let me answer your question, Carl. For all of you watching who are curious, how do you handle a decommitment and a recommitment? You go ahead and hit me up, and you get on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel for your live commitment ceremony. Boom, check that off the list. And while you're checking off the list, like, share, subscribe here on the YouTube channel. Check these two out on Twitter, and head to 247sports.com for all things college football. Now, gentlemen, it's always fun. We will see you again next week for more college football talk.